want to acknowledge that we are standing on the Susquehannock tribal lands, and that they have been stewards of this land for a long time, and we look to them to help to manage and sustain the land so that it can all be here for us in a healthy way. It's pretty exciting that in December of 2024, we had the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, and it's something to celebrate. And we're all here today because we care about our watershed and know how important it is to have clean water. I'd like to introduce you to the American Geological Union lead for AGU, Shashank Anand. And he is the Community Science Fellow, postdoctorate research scholar for the Department of Biology and Agriculture and Engineering at Texas A&M University. He focuses on enhancing modeling approach for organic carbon dynamics under various land management practices and shift climate conditions. And he's earned his PhD from Princeton University. He's going to just give you an overview of what we'll be discussing today and about the final recommendations for the project. Go ahead, Shashank.
Thanks, Tamila. I just want to acknowledge the AGU program, which is a Thriving Earth Exchange program they have for community science, and that's how we started this project. The way it typically works is any community lead who is concerned about the environmental issue in their neighborhood can come up with a scientific inquiry they would like to pursue. And then American Geophysical Union has this Thriving Earth Exchange program team that matches them up with a community science fellow who's nothing but a volunteer, mostly a scientist who's interested in facilitating and co-developing that particular project. And then community lead and the community science fellow, they come together to find the right set of scientists who can help us with the scientific knowledge, skills, networking, so that we can refine the project and make sure that it succeeds. Next slide, please. So the team that has worked on this project for almost more than a year now, as you can see it on your screen. So Tamila is the community lead for this project. I'm the community science fellow, and we have three wonderful community scientists who have worked a lot on these results that you will see today in a few minutes. So Astrid, Kiara, and Marisa are the three community science scientists who have worked on this project. Next slide, please. We would also like to acknowledge that most of the findings that we are going to present today about the monitoring and testing recommendations regarding the assessment of the health of the Conodoguinet Creek Watershed. We also presented many of these findings in American Geophysical fall meeting, which happened in December. Tamila, Kiara, and I were there in person, and it was quite well received. And we learned a lot while we were there about different approaches and questions communities around the United States trying to pursue to assess the health impacts based on the creek health. Next slide, please. So today we have designed the whole interaction. We would like it to be interactive. So if you have questions, you can ask them rather than waiting till the very end. I will begin with the question of what is this project about and why should we care about the watershed health, how it impacts us. And Tamila is going to talk about it. And then as she will talk about it, she'll show there are some gaps that needs to be addressed so that we can actually assess the health of the creek. And then in the next section, Marisa will talk about the research that was done to assess the health of the Conodoguinet Creek and the final monitoring map that we have developed. And in the following section, Kiara will go through whatever the findings that we have from the map, how can we put them into use, going into the specifics of the testing that can be done to further assess the locations that we think are the high priority zones for the creek health. And finally, Astrid will go through the ways community members can be involved in progressing this project, because in the end, it's all about community. So whatever the tools that we have developed or the activities that we have planned, and in whichever way you would like to be involved, what are the options? So I think without further ado, I think it's Tamila, over to you.
All right, thank you so much. So the kind of 6 components that I'll be going over pretty briefly. One is to talk about being surrounded by hazardous chemicals. Another one is which of these chemicals are of biggest concern? And then what are their basic health harms and impacts, as well as what are current health harms that we are experiencing in our region. I'll talk a little bit about drinking water access, and then the role that you should be playing in protecting our watersheds and keeping them healthy. Next. So this is the slide for planetary boundaries of safety, meaning it's the Earth's ability to function appropriately and make sure all systems are operating correctly and not offsetting each other. So in the top right corner, you see what's called novel entities. These are man-made products and chemicals, predominantly plastics, and you can see they've really surpassed the planetary boundary of safety for being able to absorb, dilute, or to break down these chemical toxins. In the bottom, you'll see phosphorus and nitrogen, and many of you work on mitigating these regularly, and they have really passed the planetary boundary of safety. And the novel entities and the phosphorus and nitrogen are intricately tied together through agriculture. Together, these, along with climate change, which novel entities are exacerbating, are highly influencing and impacting our biodiversity, which then in turn impacts our ability to live on a healthy planet if we don't have biodiversity. Next, there are about 350,000 chemicals that have been made. Another chemical is made every 1.4 seconds. And so we're going to figure out which ones we're going to deal with. Go ahead, next slide. One of the things that I started this project for is because we have an inadequate amount of data and it's very siloed. And it's also very challenging to locate this data. There's also so many hazardous chemicals, as was noted, and many of these hazardous toxic chemicals are not regulated. So it's important that we contribute to research and understanding of where they are and how they get into our environment in order to help promote a rationale for perhaps putting in regulations. And PFAS was one such chemical where this has happened. Next. Pollution, according to DEP, is any contamination of waters of the Commonwealth that render those waters harmful, detrimental, injurious to public health, safety, or welfare, or to legitimate beneficial use. And also these will include rivers, streams, rivulets, lakes, springs, and surface and groundwater. Next. These are the chemicals that we've narrowed down are chemical groups that we feel are the most important in our area to focus on. Next. Kiara will be going over these in detail later, but I just want to show you 3 quick slides, starting from Shippensburg, which is the westerly town in the Conodoguinet Creek Watershed. And you can see that hydrochloric acid and nitrate compounds, ethylene glycol, are really high in quantity. However, their health impacts don't bear out this equally. Chromium is actually one of the bigger chemicals of concern for health impacts, although hydrogen chloride and nickel are included in that. Next. Then you come downstream to Carlisle, and you can see you have a whole different subset of chemical toxicities that are present. So we have Carlisle Syntec, and we have some electronic manufacturing, and those lend themselves to these compounds. And it looks like zinc is the most harmful, but if you go to the right side, actually isokinates are the most impactful to our health, and manganese. Next. The next town that you get to is Mechanicsburg. And you can see on the left that it's a conglomeration of both the Shippensburg chemicals and the Carlisle chemicals, plus additional chemicals that it's contributing. And you can see that health harms are coming from all of those chemicals that were in the previous upstream locations. Next. In addition to these chemicals are plastics, and plastics equals chemicals. About 1,600 chemicals are used to make every plastic. And also these chemicals adhere to plastic and travel with plastic. Next. It's in our water, our air, our soil, and plastic and the chemicals associated with it, as well as these other chemicals that are produced, get in our water cycle. Next. Some of the health concerns are impacting fertility, inflammation of the lung and gut, immunosuppression, but there's a whole plethora of things that it impacts. This one study that was just recently published was talking about how there's about a plastic spoon's worth of plastic in our brains. And so that is impacting the way people think, at kids' attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's and dementia and all kinds of other things. Next. Another study just came out the last couple of weeks where it can impact photosynthesis of terrestrial plants and algae by up to 12%. Next. So this means it could be impacting our crop growth as well. This is PFAS specific health concerns, but all the other chemicals that we looked at have some of the similar ones, and then they also like compound. So plastics, microplastics have endocrine disrupting chemicals in them, and they work synergistically together. Next. So they found that PFAS and microplastic, when they're combined, actually increase the toxicity by 40%. Next. PFAS are also heavily present in all, or most pesticides, I should say, and they pick up additional PFAS from the high density polyethylene drums that they're in. And so they, enter our agricultural food system from there as well as through biosolids. The county, Cumberland County, is 97% impacted for environmental justice for pesticide use. Next. This is just a quick map of hazardous waste, brownfields, and Superfund sites. And you could see that Carlisle has the biggest number of them. And then Mechanicsburg, and of course, if you go over to Harrisburg, well, that's got a good bit itself, but that's outside of the Conodoguinet Creek Watershed. Next. In Carlisle alone, these are just brownfields. Next. So those slides didn't include some of the other current point source areas, such as airports, military bases, current industries, and wastewater treatment plants. But altogether, this is currently the impact it's having on our health. So you can see Carlisle is 95 percentile or better for cancer and asthma and life expectancy. And Mechanicsburg is high as well. Next. Heart disease, Carlisle is 95 percentile as well. Next. So one of the ways that we're exposed is through our drinking water. So just want to kind of like outline kind of where people are getting their drinking water. You have about 2 million people getting their drinking water from community systems with using groundwater. And then another 3.5 million people are getting it from groundwater through private wells, which are not regulated from their installation to the maintenance to the testing of the drinking water. In Cumberland County alone, which is about 2/3 of the Conodoguinet Creek Watershed, you have 99 public water providers. You have 6 of those, 9 of those are with populations that they're serving of better than 3,000, larger than 3,000. So that means the remaining 91 public water providers are serving less than 3,000. So it might be kind of hard for them to keep up with regulations and follow, the requirements for that. And then of course you have bottled water. A lot of people get their drinking water from bottled water because they think it's safer, when in actuality it's not. Most of it comes from municipal sources, and you'll have just under 250,000 nanoplastics that you're drinking and the chemicals within those. Next. So the Environmental Working Group has identified chemicals. They have a website that you can go to and you can put in your zip code and it'll kick you back the chemicals of concern in your water, and if they're above their recommended levels. Now, why is this different from the report from your municipality? Well, a lot of these chemicals aren't regulated, or their maximum contamination levels have not been readjusted for decades. So you can think of PFAS as an example of this, right? DuPont 3M knew it was toxic to our health in 1970. In the year 2000, because of a giant $1 million lawsuit, the EPA put in a health advisory of 400 parts per trillion, and then 2016 made it 70 parts per trillion, and then recently they're recommending non-detect or 4 parts per trillion for 2 of the long chain, and then 10 parts per trillion for a subset of 6. The whole class is about 16,000 PFAS. So they're those won't go into effect until 2029. So there's limited regulations. Can you go to the next slide, Kiara? So what you have is DEP set regulations that took effect in 2023, but they have higher maximum contamination levels than EPA's proposed levels, and only for PFOA and PFOS. And so, like Carlisle, for example, its average PFOS testing results are under the threshold for the state of PA for DEP's purposes. And so therefore they don't have to test anymore and share results. So they don't have to follow EPA's guidance until 2029. And then you also have the fact that, and you can stay there, PR, that's fine. You also have the fact that those test results are not including the 40 analytes that they can test for. They only are reporting on for DEP 2 and for EPA 8. Next. So there are some laws that are good laws that are supposed to be protecting us. Your Clean Streams Law makes it a crime to discharge industrial waste into the waters and to discharge any substance resulting in pollution. And then it's a crime to fail to comply with any order, permit, or license of DEP, or hinder, obstruct, prevent, or interfere with DEP's performance or duties. But this still isn't enough protection, as you can see from the picture to the right. I reported an impaired stream in 2019 and have been trying to get that one to be regulated since then. So these things take time, and it takes our initiative to help our regulatory bodies. Next. So why is relying on our regulatory bodies not enough, okay, and inadequate? And I can tell you one thing for sure, it's not because our regulatory personnel and their job and their knowledge is inadequate at all. Quite the contrary. They are the most dedicated, knowledgeable people and committed to helping us have a healthy watershed that you can come across. It's actually because of these other barriers that are around, 350,000 chemicals to regulate. So they can't study them all. Most of the studies are coming from non-regulatory bodies. Also, the industry and the American Chemistry Council lobby hard to against stronger legislation, regulation, and more accountability. They don't want any of that. Regulatory bodies are underfunded and understaffed, but they're also not in the community until the community notifies them that there's a problem, such as I did with that impaired stream. EPA proposed regulations for PFAS I already went over. It's only 8 out of 16. They don't include the 40 analytes that they can test specifically for. And Pennsylvania is adhering to a higher maximum contamination level than EPA's currently. And chemicals are only tested if they're reported hazardous by industry. And as you can see with the PFAS example, it's not in their best interest to do that because it costs them money. Next. So this is one example. There's over 80% of the plants have at least one violation from 2021 to 2023, but there were only 14% of the violators got a financial penalty, and it was very minimal. They're very small, so it behooves the company to keep their mouth shut and not follow regulations because it's a lot cheaper. Next. One example that was in our neck of the woods here going across Cumberland County and in Conodoguinet Creek, was that there was the Mariner East pipeline. They actually didn't even have a permit where they had some violations occur. But there were 23 instances of losses of circulation in these drills and 22 inadvertent returns, most of which were not reported to DEP. Next. And then, like we talked about, there's a lot of chemicals that aren't even regulated yet, but are still, causing us to accumulate more pollutants. Next. The Kurtz Creek has 2,000 parts per trillion. Next, but we just found out through the diligent efforts of American Water, they wanted to find the source of the pollutants. And that's kind of one of the things that the Creek Defenders program is trying to do. If we can find sources and prevent the toxicities from getting into our environment, we're going to be a lot better off than, try to mitigate them afterwards. So American Water notified DEP. DEP did some testing, and the total analytes for them were just under 10,000 for some private wells. But there's a big fluctuation in data. So at 1 month of data, it could have been hundreds of parts per trillion different from another time period, and the same within the creek. And the creeks ranged, between kind of like 100 and 200 parts per trillion for the PFAS. So when you get grab samples, they can vary greatly. Next. These are just some of the sites where they did some testing. So you can go to the next slide. We're going to have Marissa, our GIS expert, talk to you next. She's going to be sharing the Creek Defender map, which helps to identify spots that we should be looking at. And then she's going to show you a particular stream of focus. And then Kiara, she will follow up with her with talking about the chemicals in specific and our phases. She's going to break things out into 2 different ways. One, she's going to talk about where the map is showing that we should test and the chemicals. And then we have the reality of, well, where can we get funding to do the testing and monitoring? And so there'll be a couple of slides that she'll show you where the direction that looks like it's going currently. But we hope through this presentation that we can get some funding to tackle the phase 1 identifications that Marissa is going to share with you now. Thanks.
So I'll share my screen with the map. All right, let me just adjust this to, I hate the little bar that pops up when you look at things. Okay, so this is our Creek Defenders map viewer. It's a dynamic interactive map that has a lot of the data that Tamala was just showing. And then when you first go to the map screen, this pop-up comes up that also links back to our Creek Defender reporter form. So I'll go over that after the map, but just those are 2 main pieces that are interlinked here, and then you can access it multiple ways. So if you come here and click on this link, it takes you to the form, but also if you were going out with your mobile device, you can scan the QR code here and then it'll pop up on your phone so you have it when you're out. Let me get this small. All right, so when you first open up the map, it centers on Conodoguinet Creek, and that's the blue line that you see swirling through the landscape here. And then these red dots are actually form submissions that Tamala and other folks have put of points of concern throughout the watershed. And one of the main ways to interact with this map is by looking at all the data layers. So if you go over to the right, this last button, These are all of the different data layers that we have information for in the map. So, for example, we have land cover, and this land cover layer is showing across the watershed what areas are forested with trees, what areas are agricultural and have crops on them, and then what areas are, they call them built areas, but basically that's like the urban environment, like something is paved. And that's helped us inform, like, the pesticide issue for PFAS, where are we seeing that coming into the streams? The other data layers we have are federal government land. So there's a few locations within the watershed that are, the land is administered by the federal government. So if I zoom in to Carlisle here and click on one of these, we can see that there's a huge chunk of land for the Carlisle Barracks. Two chunks of land for the Carlisle Barracks. Over here on the right, there's some other Department of Defense land. If I go all the way over here to the left, there's a huge Army Depot land. And then actually this other stream that runs through the Conodoguinet watershed is considered a national scenic trail and also administered nationally. So that plays into like when we want to do testing on some of these lands, who are their different stakeholders that need to be engaged with. The other layer are the environmental justice communities. So this is the layer published by the state of Pennsylvania, published by the DEP, that we're looking at what communities are most disadvantaged because of an index of environmental concerns that they face. And if we look closely at Carlisle and these more urban areas, we see that they have a really high percentage of environmental justice populations. Oops, sorry, too many windows at once. So if I click in here, we can see that there's a large percentage of, children in these areas. We can also scroll through and see what are the really big areas of exposure that they're facing. And the thought behind this is that in areas that are high environmental justice areas, we want to target those because they're more at risk. And then, John, I see you have your hand raised.
John, you're muted. You can talk.
The National Scenic Trail, you're referring to the Appalachian Trail. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Is that a question or?
Yes.
Oh, let me check.
That would be the course of the Appalachian Trail. And the
Yep.
Department of the Interior owns significant land holdings out on the east side of Carlisle there. They're called balloon purchases. They have to purchase so many acres per mile of trail, and some of the areas are not of the specified width of the Park Service. That's a side note. The biggest issue with respect to the Army War College was a fish kill on the Lee Tort that was the result of a practice that's called cured in place piping, where the resin actually got directly into the Lee Tort and caused a fairly significant fish kill, but also they had specified that the water was not to be was unfit for human contact, and I got, I'm sure, on a federal list for going down there and taking pictures of children swimming in it while it was supposed to be under that ban. So, I mean, there's a number obvious of toxins, but you got to look for events like that. And when Pamela was when Tamala was mentioning the pipeline links, I think it's also noteworthy for the group that there was a significant loss of heating oil, over 13,000 gallons, that closed down the water supply for 42,000 people here a year ago. And that was under a condition created by an exemption that's in the underground storage tank regulations that dates back to 1988. So just a few points from an old geezer that dates his involvement with the creek back to alarm. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. And those are very important things. And it sounds like you and I need to have some more talks, and you'd be great to, participate in this project. And we really could use you. When I first started getting interested in the watershed, that's what I came across, a person who had lived here his whole life, and he, informed me about 4 legacy landfills. And so that kind of started my journey. So I appreciate you coming today and sharing with us. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those would also be really interesting things to put into this form for us to map too.
Well, I would also offer that I spent 27 years with the Commonwealth regulating all pesticides that are registered for use in the Commonwealth, and that I came down here to run an ag chemical plant on the Yellow Breeches Creek, which is one of those Superfund sites that you put up earlier. So yeah, I know where the bodies are buried too. I'm sorry to tell you.
Interesting.
No, that would be sorry. I'm excited about it, because with we have knowledge of things, then we can take actions appropriately. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, I know Tamala mentioned a lot about the data before, but just from my professional knowledge kind of in data science and also from this project, a lot of what I saw is that historical data sources aren't really easily available or well managed, so that knowledge you have about like when events were occurring or where certain people were like kind of at risk without maybe really knowing about it because the risk was at such a molecular level, like that's really good to add to this form because that's a big gap that like there's not a good way that at least I found that was being like tracked or captured right now.
Well,
Uh,
if
yeah.
I could, one source that I'm not hearing mentioned is DEP, and specifically the South Central Regional Office, and looking historically at employees there. Robert Schott, a now retired aquatic biologist, has a very in-depth and intricate knowledge of all of these tributaries and the entire length of the watershed. And I can't overstate this point because it was one you touched on, and I was kind of hoping you weren't going to delve too much into the politics here because that was going to draw my ire, but you did touched on that third rail. You got to understand that a lot of folks in regulatory, myself included, were blackballed for attempting to actually enforce the law. So there's a tremendous current against people of conscience in government being able to actually come forth candidly and do their job. And there's a young man in the South Central office who handles the storage tank issues who would very much like to have been more vocal on the gap in the statutory authority to control those types of actions. But under an administration that has prided itself on expediency of permitting, and you can see this most acutely in the areas that are being hydrofracked, a great current to swim against, and the prospect of having your career pretty much functionally eliminated. So I'll just offer that.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of alluding to without trying to say too much. So thank you for those additional comments. Yeah, that's what I said. Everyone that I've talked to in the regulatory bodies are absolutely wonderful people. Yeah. All right, Marissa, keep going. Show us what else we've got.
All right. The other data layers here are the boundaries of the different watersheds. So if I just turn on, this is a classification scheme that the scientists at the USGS used to designate watersheds. So I just copied how they did it here. And then for reference, these are the 3 watersheds of the Conodoguinet Creek. So there's the upper, the middle, and then the lower. And so the flow is left to right here, where eventually, I'm sure you're all familiar, it goes into the Susquehanna River. So those are just some resources to kind of help the environmental scientists in the room. And the other type of boundaries I have are, in my field, we call them political, but they're really just like any way that the land is broken down. So for example, municipalities in Pennsylvania. So you could see which sections of the river intersect with which municipalities. Sometimes it's even the boundary between a few of them. You could look at it with zip codes if that makes more sense to you. I know some people like think in terms of zip codes, but the boundaries are always like really wonky, like you can see here. And then there's also school districts. So there's that way to connect it back to, you know, the school children and bring them in if they want to be part of the issues that are happening in their community. And then on the advocacy front, there's US congressional districts. So if the issue is happening, it looks like in the middle and the lower parts of the creek, the representative for that would be Scott Perry. He's Congressional District 10, if that helps you when you're writing your letters. And then at the state level, there's House districts. So if I open one of those up, I can see that Barbara Lime, her district 199 covers a significant portion of the creek, but we also have a few other representatives, Thomas Cutts, Cheryl DeLazier, and then I think one more up here, Richard Urban. And if you click on this little link down here, it just takes them to like their official page so you can find their contact information and more about them. Same with the Senate districts for Pennsylvania, so that's all in there. And then the data part that we spent a lot of time pulling together are these top sources up here. So first, we looked at a lot of like federal and EPA data to see what they've marked as PFAS sources. So for example, if I turn on industrial facilities, and I'll note that this might look a little different than the map Tamala showed because this isn't all industrial facilities. These are just facilities that use PFAS in some type of way. And so you can come here and you can click on any of these little squares to find out more about what the facility's name is, how they're classified, and then information to the reports. And up here on the right, there's a little like legend button, and it tells you what each of the colors mean. So the government classifies all these facilities by a specific type of industry, and that's also how they're regulated. So if you kind of look at it from this perspective, you could say, hey, we have a lot of I think a lot of these reds are metal coating, so maybe you might want to look at, should we have better regulations for these metal coating industries that are really close to the creek? You could also ask questions. What is this other one is like a chemical manufacturing plant. And so you can kind of start to see what patterns are happening and what you might be at risk for, and then ask more questions or try to make better policies around that. There's also Superfund sites, and the color for these is a little bit muted, but there's one over here by the Navy shipyard. So this is a Superfund site that they think that PFAS might be coming from. And then further upstream, there's 2 PFAS sites by the Letterkenny Army Depot. So those could also be a significant source of the pollution. This one is all the facilities, but the ones that are administered by the federal government. So if you're gonna address some policy for those, that would be like a stakeholder that needs to be engaged with that at that level. And these are, again, the Army areas, and also some other DoD sites. And then lastly, there's a few, they call them monitored discharge facilities, and these are usually wastewater treatment plants. So at the lower end of the creek, there's this Hamden Township facility that has been marked as discharging perfluorooctane sulfonate. And that's in the EPA reports for that facility, but that indicates that, there's some more of that pollution that's happening downstream as well. So outside of those point sources, there's also been a lot of other monitoring facilities throughout the creek that are trying to capture some of this. So the big databases we pulled from are this EPA database that tells you the stream quality. And I think, John, this is maybe a little bit what you were getting at. This is kind of like how that data would be captured. So based on a few different criteria, the EPA marks streams as either good, polluted, or unassessed. You can see that a lot of the streams in the Conodoguinet watershed are polluted. And that's majorly, if you click on them, you can see that what's down here? It gives you the different regions or reasons that they fit that classification. A lot of them, when I was looking at, is because they have a really high sediment load, which can also be a trapper for PFAS chemicals when you have that happening throughout the watershed. And then I think also a few of them pathogens, which might be something that's coming from the croplands, because if you overlay the streams that are considered polluted with the land cover, you can see, I'll zoom in over here. So this yellow area is agriculture, this green area is forested. And as soon as the streams enter the agricultural areas, they're being marked as polluted. And that, to me, that indicates that there's a way to kind of address this from an agricultural perspective too, by like engaging with farmers, because they're affecting the water in that way. We've also collected data, or not collected, but we have data from the USGS water sampling sites. If I click on one of their water sample stations over here, there's a lot of.
If I may.
Sure.
With respect to pathogens, your major player, and this comes from 40 years of experience in agriculture, is on the Conodoguinet more likely to be point source, insofar as there are a plethora of package plants, treatment plants, serving trailer parks, smaller communities, elementary schools, middle schools along the course of the creek. Those package plants, I dare say 90% of them are in violation. They have a life expectancy of about 5 years, and most of these are in the 30-year, 40-year, perhaps even 50-year ballpark of age. That really needs to be established much more surgically than drawing with a broad brush as that map would tend to suggest. And I offer that just for the sake of accuracy, because agriculture certainly is a major contributor, but the amount of agriculture is grossly diminished in the area as development comes into play. And the Conodoguinet, for the most part, runs through Burke Shale, which doesn't lend itself well to agricultural production. So a lot of the fields areas that you're looking at the streams course through are in hay or in low input crops because of the droughtiness of the soil. So the amount of actual E. coli and bacteria of that type that's entering in there is probably from human sources more so. Again, this is all area that I serviced as an agronomist back in the 80s. So
yeah, I mean that sounds like it makes sense to me. That the map is really just a tool to have a conversation about those things and point them out.
oh, I understand that,
Yeah.
but it was the modeling, EPA modeling, and all the inherent errors that were in that discredited the Chesapeake Bay program to a large degree. And you really want to maintain that credibility. So
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about the EPA data and modeling and quality control of it. I think that I found out going through this, basically there was just a lot of things that were left blank for
yeah, well,
like
they only have what they're getting from DEP.
yeah.
And after the Rendell administration, who laid off a tremendous component of state employees, but hit DEP the hardest, their staffing is skeletal at best.
Yeah.
And that's why you're not having these stream assessments done. I mean, over the time that the Clean Water and Clean Streams Act, you're dating back to 1937. Certainly, assessments of all streams should have reasonably been done in that period, but yet not. So, just a thought.
Yeah, it's a lot, and there's a lot missing. And yeah, it has implications. Like, you don't even know if there's a problem sometimes because they don't have enough funding to monitor if there's a problem. And then I think this kind of goes into that, but there was some research done by a USGS scientist back in 2019, I think, where they did a lot of their own sampling across the state of Pennsylvania. And so if I click on, it's a little difficult to see some of these gray dots. But if I click on them, there's a lot of chemicals that they found. The RO chemicals were really prominent back when they were testing them. Oh, sorry. They collected the data in 2012. And then I think it took some time for them to test it and then to actually publish the paper, a couple of years. But they did a lot of testing, also with the PADEP, and they did it with like the water quality. Tissue is usually like they're taking samples from animals, like sometimes fish. And they have a lot of data points for that, but also the I think scientific equipment that they were using to detect it, and some of the science was a little bit earlier. So even some of these threshold levels are for detection of the different chemicals are like varying a lot throughout the timelines of the data, and that also makes it a little difficult to understand like where the problem areas are.
Well, your fish tissue data and your macroinvertebrate data, that's the best indicators you have over time period. And you've already alluded to the inaccuracy of grab samples. So when you're developing these data sets, looking at tissue samples is really, from my perspective, the better source for those, especially when you're looking at PFAS and other fat-soluble compounds.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it would bioaccumulate to like a good detection level, but the animals go up and down the stream, so it is maybe a bit more difficult to pinpoint.
The amount of movement of fish, you would be surprised how limited it actually is. Back when John Orway was still a biologist, and prior to the Ridge or the Rendell administration, I was on the fish advisory consumption technical committee for fish advisories. And pretty much everything you were looking at then was a chemical that was banned in the 80s, chloridane. But your bigger factors are unique events like occurred in 96, where sediment was scarified, releasing toxins that were probably introduced into the watershed going back 80 years. There were even fish kills on the Little Juniata during that event that were the result of a crash in the macroinvertebrate populations from insecticides that were used in the 40s.
Thanks, John, so much for this. We're gonna have to kind of move along to get
Oh yeah,
through
yeah.
the
I'm
rest
sorry.
of the stuff, but I would love to have another, roundtable discussion of just talking like this. No presentations, just people getting together and talking, and we'll schedule something. And your input is invaluable and very, very important. And I'm really excited to hear so much more. So Marissa, you want to continue?
Yeah. So I'll just go through it a little quickly, but we took a lot of that data, and then there's these pollution hotspots that we came up with, and eventually that was used to inform the proposed monitoring areas. So at the biggest level, we just looked at all areas that were near either like a point source or some detection sampling that happened before, and also just agricultural land. So this is that data layer of all the different places where we think PFAS might be coming from. That was used to then select streams that might be good for testing. So there's a lot of agricultural areas, so I broke it up into target streams. These orange ones here don't include the ag areas. But these ones here, these yellow streams, they do include the agricultural areas. So these are like all the places that might have been good for testing. And then based on that, as a team, we came together and identified different areas that would be good for proposed testing or monitoring locations. So there were 4 different phases we came up with. The first phase is along Latort Creek here. And Latort Creek it actually intersected like a lot of the different pollution sources we were looking at. Like it was a little bit of agricultural land. It was close to like some major industrial sites. You can see it goes pretty close. It runs through like Carlisle and close to those army depots. So all of these point locations, there's a little Latin long if you want to see, but they're all close to roads for easy access, and they're before and after certain sites, so it's good for doing comparisons. And then the other locations we chose for the subsequent phases that we would do for monitoring. So there's phase 2, which is pretty spread out along the Conodoguinet. There's phase 3, which has more of a focus on the lower, and then there's phase 4, which is a few sites at the beginning and then a few sites at the end. So that's all of the data that you can have here. If you need any more information, you can usually just click on anything in the map and it has little pop-ups. Something else that I think is neat is there's a print button over here. So if I click this, it'll just print like a little PDF map if you want to like send that to someone. That's useful. And then down here in the bottom left, there's a way to just switch the map between looking at like streets, which is has a little bit less going on. So sometimes it's easier to look at the data, and then the satellite, which has more information. And then lastly, I'll go over the pollution report form. So this is the form that's linked to when you open the map, and it's also all of these little red dots of firsthand accounts of different pollution recordings that we see. And so when you open the form, there's a lot of different options. There's also a little page detailing instructions. So basically, we want to collect information on like when did the observation occur. You can upload any photos that you took there. They could be photos you took in the moment, or if you already have them on your phone, you can just add them. There's some information about detailing like what did you find. You can use the map here to like put the direct location that you observed it from. And then down here, you can upload any other like videos or documents or just like any other files you want. You can add some comments here. And if you want, if you feel more comfortable talking than like typing on your phone, you can also just do an audio recording. And we also went through a safety kind of implementation where we don't share your audio recording on the map or anything like that. It actually just like we transcribe it and then it would be put as just text there. And we also remove like your name or any contact information. So all the submissions are reviewed before they get put on the map, and they're also put on the map as anonymous so no one can trace it back to you. Let me just fill out some dummy data so it'll let me go to the next page. There's some optional questionnaires in the survey too. So if you're specifically looking at petrochemical hazards, you can detail, you know, if you're feeling any tremors, if there's a lot of loud noise, if you're having issues with your water quality. And then the last pages of the form are just like your information. So if you want to share your name with us, if you want to share your role when filling out the field. So if you're a scientist or resident or multiple different roles, that's fine. If you have any affiliations currently, and then if you want to share your contact information so we can reach out with more information. I'm just going to fill this out. Do that. Okay, next. And then the last page is just you just read the terms and conditions, and it talks a little bit about the privacy statement, and then you sign it, and it gets sent to Tamala, who reviews it, and then after review, it gets put on the map. And that is all I have for the map.
And just a caveat to that is I will take the report and, share it with those who it's most appropriate. So if someone entered a fish kill, we'd be talking to Fish and Boat or Trout Unlimited, or and we would vet the information before it gets put on a map with the appropriate people. There's also a way to click to make a DEP report. And if you don't want to use your own name and email, you can use Move Past Plastics. And if you still don't put in a DEP report, but we think one needs to be submitted, we'll submit one on your behalf, I guess. So yeah, thank you so much, Marissa.
Oh,
So now Kiara is going to clip through some information on some chemicals, maybe lightly, Kiara, so you can go focus more on our recommendations. That would be great, because people can go back and look at the slides for the chemicals.
Okay, can you see the point
Yes.
source potential focuses?
Thank you,
Okay,
Kiara.
great. Just to reiterate a little bit of what Marissa already shared, we, starting out, thought about several different potential point sources. We looked at things from airports, agriculture, development, disposal, petrochemicals. All of these are sources of contamination that we tried to consider when we put together the map. And so those different phases that Marissa showed on the map, the ones that we've identified for testing, include this initial phase with the Letort Creek samples that she showed, but then following that, phase 2, in which we would monitor more directly along the Conodoguinet. And this would be to understand more so the overall health and state of contamination from the start to the end of the Conodoguinet. Here we would focus mostly on microplastics, PFAS, PAHs, and other persistent organic pollutants, which I'll define a bit more later for those who aren't familiar. Our phase 3 would be a follow-up with more of the secondary tributaries. So here specifically, we're thinking of Trindle Spring Run, but based on the results of phase 1 and phase 2, we could direct our focus accordingly. The fourth phase would then be, again, more follow-up sites. This is incorrect. Phase 4 would actually be more about the landfills or biosolids spreading. I meant to edit this, but you'll see that when I show this again. Phase 1 has a Letort. Phase 2 is directly along the Conodoguinet. Phase 3 has that Trindle Spring, but also some sites downstream of landfills or of wastewater treatment plants in the case over here. And just I'd like to give a brief overview of some of these contaminants of concern. We're looking at what are called persistent organic pollutants, POPs. Those are contaminants or chemicals that are difficult to break down in the environment through chemical or biological means. They include things like these PFAS that we've talked about. Some people call PFAS forever chemicals. They're fluorinated compounds. Heavy metals include things like lead, copper, cadmium, arsenic. Tamala's already mentioned microplastics, and then I'll talk a bit about these others just to give some more context. PFAS, they stand for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are compounds that are highly fluorinated, and there are within this chemical compound class over 15,000 chemicals that can span 200 unique applications. As Tamala mentioned earlier, there are now regulations for drinking water, but there are no regulations for biosolids. Currently, they're linked to several adverse health effects, including thyroid disease, increased blood cholesterol levels, and low infant birth rates, just to name a few. Testing for these compounds is usually done in specialized labs that have liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry. Otherwise, there's also combustion ion chromatography, but both of these testing methods require expensive instrumentation. So we would need to send samples to a lab that is able to do this analysis. For PAHs, that stands for polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These are sourced from combustion processes. There are a lot of now anthropogenic sources, things like exhaust pipes, smoke from cigarettes, and a lot of industries. They're linked to different toxicity, different adverse health effects, including being carcinogens, impacting eye and skin, and having chronic health effects as well. Similar to PFAS, these ones involve high-performance liquid chromatography or gas chromatography, mass spectrometry. So again, these require specialized labs to do the testing and the analysis. Diisocyanates are in things like coatings, adhesives, and sealants, medical equipment, and sometimes sports equipment. Like the others, they're linked to different adverse health effects, particularly for skin irritation and contact with the skin. And in terms of testing, it's again similar to the other compounds where we'd have to send them to a lab for GCMS or HPLC. Last one I'd like to just mention is the polychlorinated biphenyls. These are the PCBs that you might have heard of. They're linked with electricity production, incineration, pesticide formulas, or hydraulic fluids, and are often in plastics as well. They can be endocrine disruptors, and they can bioaccumulate, meaning once their aquatic life is exposed to it, the concentrations increase as those work their way through the food web. Testing for PCBs is usually gas chromatography. As I've mentioned, the different testing options, a lot of them require these specialized labs. However, for a more accessible, I guess, initial screening process, we were suggesting using macroinvertebrate testing, and John mentioned this earlier. This would give us a better overall bioassessment of areas that have lower diversity of these macroinvertebrates, so used as indicators of the health of the stream. And there are existing organizations that do this type of testing, like ALARM, that will have volunteers go out, so that's a community engagement component, where they can sample them and then they will get sent to a lab for analysis. In addition to the macroinvertebrate testing, I came across this sampling cartridge. They're called Polar Organic Chemical Integrative Samples. The USGS has developed these, and these discs get put into this cartridge and then placed in the water from anywhere from week scale to a month scale, and this is a form of passive sampling. Sorry, in the case of the contaminants that we're interested in looking at, they can help us sample PFAS, test pesticides, and personal care products. So we would have someone place them in the stream, but then we have to figure out where we can send these cartridges for analysis. So that's something I'm trying to communicate with the USGS right now. There's also the semi-permeable membrane devices. They were developed by the same people. And these ones could be used for PCBs and PAHs and pesticides more so. It's similar setup of passive sampling where you would put these, I guess this metal cage loaded with these semi-permeable membranes into the water. Usually this is done over 1 month, but for this one, it can go from days to months. And then we get a better idea of the contamination that the fish and the aquatic life are exposed to, because this is an in situ measurement. We've been in contact with a professor at Penn State, Dr. Lisa Emily, and she indicated most interest in looking at the sites directly along the Conodoguinet Creek. We called these our phase 2, but for our collaboration and work with her, she would consider them phase 1. And for these, she wants to do grab sampling with a team that she has assembled. She and Tamla have assembled. Her phase 1 is establishing first the state of the watershed, and she really wants to focus more so on microplastics and PFAS and other persistent organic pollutants if possible, but I think the microplastics and PFAS are what she'll be analyzing primarily with those grab samples. The second phase would be assessing the extent of legacy pollution. And I think this would be more of our phase 3, but her phase 2. This would include also core samples, again for microplastics and PFAS. For phase 3 would expand the monitoring to also include pesticides, heavy metals, and places that might be impacted by biosolid spreading. And the last one would be more targeted sampling based on the earlier phases to understand more of the ecological risk assessment for these sites. And then I think we're on to solutions and community voices from Astrid.
Yes, hello. So what I'm going to talk to you a little bit today is about what are some of the steps that we can take as a community and individuals to keep the people, wildlife, and the environment healthy. Next slide, please. So one of them is environmental education. And one of our first events that we had, we presented people with information about the health advisories for PCB and mercury that are in place in Cumberland County. And they provide guidance about how many fish can people eat given the presence of these pollutants on the creek. And one member of the public asked, how do we, the people walking down the street, get notified about these warnings? I have lived here for years and have not been aware of this information. So this just highlights how important and necessary environmental education still is. Next. And another step we can take is monitoring and citizen science. And as Marisa described earlier, we have the project developed the Creek Defenders Pollution Report Form, where the community, persons of the community themselves can use it to keep track of pollution, just when they see it in their community, take a picture, and the location will be recorded and displayed on the Creek Defenders map. And we have implemented this in one of our challenges, the artificial playing surface challenges, where people can locate the surfaces and map them. Next. Next slide, please. All right. And, thank you. Another way that we can also involve the community is a little bit more expressive. And this is, by taking pictures and publishing notes about pollution or nature or anything that's going on in the community. We have this platform that's a Cricket Snapshot. It's on Padlet, and people from the community can just post, just pictures, comments, or news that they have about pollution and nature. And next. Another important step that we need to take in terms of solutions is the community voice and choice. So essentially, it's listening to what communities have to say, what their problems are, their experiences, and what's working, what's not, and how to improve things, right? So we have here a series of comments from different news about the environment around the Conodoguinet Creek, and some of the issues, that are here as the Mariner East 2 pipeline and fracking. And as we can see here, we have people saying that I have seen how justice played out here, and it's not justice. And they're referring to, the fines that are given for violations for these companies that were building the pipeline, a slap on the wrist, that companies just keep polluting and nothing really changes. And also we have some people that express their discontent at fracking, and they say that, people are getting sick. So this just listening to the community, we can tell that some of the deterrents for pollution that we have, like fines, are not really working, and people feel there's no justice being served. Next. Another issue that we have in Pennsylvania too is around waste management. And we can see here artificial turf fields. Once they reach the end of life, they're just being left out in, vacant lots or sometimes, rented lots. And they're just making disposal someone else's problem. So this is speaking to an issue of externalized cost and avoidance of responsibility. Next. And another issue that also is happening is with climate change, there's an increase, in the frequency and intensity of storms. And that some of the solutions that communities have come up with is rain gardens. But as we hear some of the members, rain gardens are good to kind of collect the water, prevent flooding, and trap some of the pollutants that get mobilized. But there's also the danger of exposing communities to gentrification. So that's something that needs to be taken into account when implementing these solutions. And I would like to read you part of a quote from a member of the community in Harrisburg. It says, people want healthy environments, but what they also want is access. Who is present at these decision-making tables? And I think this is a very important point about including the community itself, like putting them at the table. That's because that's really the only way that they can make their voices and opinions heard. And next slide, please. And another thing that we can do is to allocate funding and people for monitoring, and then just support initiatives and help communities and different groups to perform this kind of work. And I'll hand it over to Tamela for the next ones.
Yeah, you can skip this slide. I thought I had ripped it out, but so we can have people volunteering for this educational outreach. As Astrid was saying, there's just a lot of people who are unaware of different things and what they can do to not contribute to the problem and to help the problem. So this is one way of outreach. Next. So just volunteering for research testing. So if you're into social media, documentation, GIS, if you want to help with grant writing or be a fiscal sponsor, these are just a handful of ways that you can help with Creek Defender Project moving forward. Next. And you can support policy and legislation, because systemic change is very important. Just like we have new maximum contamination levels for PFAS, maybe we could regulate the whole class as Washington State is doing, instead of playing whack-a-mole and just addressing a few of them. And get PFAS to not be used in our food packaging and personal care products or textiles or building materials. These are just some of the things that we can do there. Next. So we could maybe test our biosolids before we apply them, because it's an excellent nutrient source, and we really want to use it if at all possible, if it doesn't exacerbate the accumulation of hazardous chemicals. It's fantastic source. We could also support organic agriculture. Something that I have found is doctors and the people who take care of us don't know about these health problems. So helping to educate them and helping them to educate their patients is something we could do. And maybe we could get some laws helping to regulate well testing, or at least provide education to those with wells, and about filtration and testing. Next. But you can do all kinds of things. This was a case study done for just getting businesses to skip the stuff where they had residents, or customers ask if they wanted the plastic silverware rather than just dropping it in their bag or using it. And they had a significant reduction in the plastic of 94%, and almost 10,000 pounds of plastic just from forks and spoons. It's crazy. Next. And this is how you can reach out to us to be involved with Move Past Plastic and the Creek Defenders Project in any capacity that you can, and support helping your community to have a healthy watershed. And we have 2 minutes officially. If there are any questions, we would love to entertain it. And yeah, just thank you so much, everybody. I do want to say before we go is this has been an incredibly enriching experience with working with the Creek Defender team, these young adults, and their knowledge and their generosity, time, and talent is just an overwhelming sense of gratitude I have. So thanks, guys. Cheers to you. So much.
That was great.
Elizabeth, Brooke, John, any other further comments or questions?
I don't know. I'm kind of digesting everything.
Right.
That was
There
a
was a
lot
lot.
to take in. It was definitely a lot. I think kind of just my thoughts tend to go to for example, that mapping is wonderful. It is very thorough. My thought is thinking, update, the data, updating it as time goes on. And then also, can you use maybe some of your location data where you had, I'm thinking of one of the map with the PCBs, where those were detected. Can you use some of the data about where you have specific pollutants or releases to recommend further testing to see if that is still, because that might be that was legacy contamination.
Yeah.
To kind of come back and help direct current funding and current resources to test those legacy sites to determine if they still exist. I'm thinking delisting streams based on impairments that may have been historic, but maybe things had changed over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the map should be reflecting that and giving its recommendation is what little data was out there and having it. But you bring up a good point, is most of the data that is out there is data from a decade or two. It's from a long time ago. And as you know, Cumberland County has evolved a lot. But that said, what I was finding is the legacy industry is with us hardcore today in that stream, in the Middle Creek stream, and so much else. And so people like John, you're critical. Your knowledge base is absolutely critical to us, moving forward and, figuring out, these sites that might be unknown, and, the data, it might not be there, but you could help, tell us about it.
DEP will hate me for offering this suggestion, but I'm a heavy utilizer of the right to know law, and doing a right to know for all NPDES permits would be a good place to start with DEP.
Well, I'd love to have your help with that, John, because I filed a few and they've been rejected and they've gone to appeal and they've been rejected.
Oh, no. No, I don't back down from the
Well,
Office
I've
of
got a
Open
lot on my
Records.
plate and I'm not a lawyer, so you come help me. But
Yeah.
I do know that talking to them, they want to try and give you whatever they can without the right to knows. But even, the municipalities as well as DEP, it's just kind of a technical loophole that you have to jump through for them, whether they want you to or not. And it's just a thing. And so
The staff
I was
would
sad to hear
rather,
that, but
the staff would rather you actually use the right to know avenue,
yep. And I
because then
didn't
that
realize
legally
that for
forces
years.
them.
Yeah, because I was thinking to myself, well, I just want to be your friend. I just want this data. It's a friendly thing. I don't want to, ruffle any feathers or whatever. And then after, like I said, 4 years of learning, I'm like, okay, I'm so, the system is set up so you need to file the right to know for everybody's benefit. And because then it makes it public record and all of this. So I've
And
got about 10 right to knows that I need to file. Come help me do them.
the other agency, well, I'm busy with Silver Spring Township. The other agency that you might want to file with for, say, the last 5 years or so is spills reported to the Fish Commission involving some type of a fish kill on the Conodoguinet.
I know through talking with my contact through DEP, they were saying that, and I think it's the same person you were referring to, that there's literally hundreds of oil drum leaks in the county per week, per month, not just like per year.
Well,
Oh my gosh.
Congress, in their infinite wisdom in 1988, exempted underground heating oil tanks, no matter the capacity, from regulation under the Underground Storage Tank Act. And that was just an homage to the fossil fuel industry. So there are literally thousands of them out there waiting to breach.
Yeah, and apparently are breaching. So
they're all reaching. Yeah, they're reaching
Yeah.
their life expectancy.
So that might be, some ordinance, some legislation, that we can, work on. But Brooke, do you have any comments?
I do have a comment.
Yes.
And it really, after watching this presentation, in my head, I just keep thinking of the disconnect between environmental factors and the medical community. And how are we you said you're gonna educate doctors, but how do we do that? Is there a
Yeah, it's crazy because like I walked into my GYN doctor and then I just kind of asked her, I said, hey, I just wanted to know, do you talk with your patients about microplastics and PFAS at all? And she just gave me a look like, what are you asking me?
Yeah.
Like, no, this is like forbidden.
Mm.
And she's like, well, no, I follow, oh God, I don't want to say it now because I'm dyslexic with it, but what is the health academy that regulates that?
The CDC or
No,
the
not
National
CDC,
Institute of Health?
National
Institute of Health.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's it. It came to me. Okay, I have a hard time to
There's a
recall
lot of
sometimes. Yeah.
They've been fired.
I was like, yes, my information is coming from them, and it's something you should really consider because really impacting our most vulnerable, our pregnant moms,
yeah.
our nursing moms.
The estrogen
young-
disruption.
It's I won't get into it, but yes, it is seriously bad. But what's really great is we can minimize our exposure.
Right.
Honestly, one simple thing, just dust your house and vacuum.
Okay.
30%
I
30% of the microplastics fibers in your household dust is plastic.
Wow.
And so you can just like do that, and don't cook in plastic.
Okay.
And don't store in plastic. So simple things. Is it going to stop everything? No, but there are things you can do. And the same with PFAS. And that's what's just, really great is it's just knowing. Can you eliminate it? No, we're under assault from chemical toxicities, but can you minimize it? Yes. Don't be anal. Don't get yourself scared about it. Just
Right.
do a few key things. Wash your clothes less. Take a bottle of cheap vodka, dilute it with water, take it, spray it on the parts that stink, and then hang it back up in your closet. Honestly, that's less microfibers you're putting into our creek.
Right.
Simple. It's the simplest solutions, right? And they're out there.
I was just going to ask you briefly, following on the health concern. The reporting sheet, the reporting form. I remember you highlighted like tremors or things like that. Are there other things that people can fill in there in terms of symptoms? Because I know whenever the agricultural spraying occurs, my neighbors totally glyphosates their entire yard of almost 10 acres. I get migraines really badly when that occurs.
We could add that. Marissa just bounced out, but we could add that as a category. We don't have that as a separate category,
Yeah.
but it would fall under petrochemical because
Right.
it is.
Right.
So you could put that. And then what I'm wanting to do for phase 2 of the pollution report form is to have breakouts where it asks additional questions that are specific to the pollution that's being reported.
Gotcha.
So right now it's just kind of gives you the form and space to write whatever you want, but we would have, more, what's it called?
Like tags.
More specific.
A drop down menu.
Drop down menu specifics. And then of course you can add anything, but that way we get consistent data. So like for the artificial turf, we would say, hey, take a picture of the turf and then the ground surrounding it going out, so many feet, and go look in the drain gutters. Is it down in there? We would walk you through, and or if it's food processing residuals, there's a set thing that we would walk them through to fill out. That way the data is more consistent.
Yeah, because that's what you need, because that
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to get doing next is to work on that pollution report form. That way we are drawing in consistent data. Now, like people might not know, that's fine, but it at least guides them to that specific data. And then, I do like, like I said, I'm not working alone in a silo. I get a report in, I'm going to take it to whoever is dealing with that.
Well, yeah, and I was going to suggest that too with our MS4 communities. They are required for part of their permit to, maintain illicit discharge reporting. So having the ability to share that with them or just to see how they're currently handling reporting and maybe potentially enhancing that.
Yeah, and we can interface that, and then that way they can see, because like the whole Middle Creek situation, all the streams, all the municipalities downstream, they don't know. I'm pulling together stuff because I don't want to just have this shock scare factor. So Astrid helped develop, we've got a 1-page where it tells people, okay, if this is you, here's the filters you can get, here's where you can go to get yourself a health screening, blood work, like
And like some of the
It
tests.
gives them, yeah,
testing
exactly,
resources
the
too.
test and resources
Yeah.
and the tools
Yeah.
and everything. And then, that way municipalities can just post that one pager, and then if they want more information, there will be a link to kick them to more than a one pager, so we're working on that. Because I do
Pamela-
every, yeah, go ahead, Astrid.
Yes, I just wanted to add like something that you said about that some of the households that were affected by high PFAS concentrations rejected bottled water
Yeah, yeah.
because they
And
are
that shocked me, right? So there were 7 wells that were tested and only 3 residential locations accepted bottled water. And then the manager, he told me on the phone when I was, telling him, because they didn't have scheduled a virtual option. And he said, well, I don't know what they're doing, but I'm just going to open the door and leave because this isn't a problem. And that just like made my heart sink. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, DEP isn't telling the people how this could be impacting their health and giving them information to go and help themselves. And then the manager of the borough isn't aware. And so like we need to educate, and that's what I mean by education and communication. We need to work together to communicate to everyone without, not terrifying people, but just working together. And so we've got to have a better system for communication, because you could see from the maps that I showed you, the chemicals from one municipality migrated to the next and then to the next. And then they had their own subset of chemicals. And so we're all downstream, and what we do is impacting, and then there's the air, and then there's the soil, and then it's traveling states away. It really is. It's like in Florida, they had PFAS high levels in their creek, and they couldn't figure out where it was coming from because their manufacturers weren't using those PFAS. And lo and behold, it was coming from states away up north and raining on them. And the rain contained the source of PFAS. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Right?
I recently read an article on biosolids too, and the biosolids industry was saying, well, you can't just say that we are concentrating and causing this until they're eliminated much, higher up on the chain.
Yes.
We're always going to see this contamination.
They're always going to see it. And that's what I'm trying to prevent is we need our biosolids spray.
Right.
It's important because the more we can recycle a natural resource into nutrient, but we can't do it if it's full of chemical toxins. So that's why I'm trying to get us to find these point sources, stop them from getting in our system, and yes, there's some research that can break down a couple of PFAS or this plastic or whatever, but like, it's not, it's just, in the lab, it's not something that can be put out in.
Right. And like our reverse osmosis, that kind of, those filtration systems can't necessarily address all of it.
They do a real good job. I've got a reverse osmosis. Yeah, they do almost all of it. And I've got my system was 600, it's now 700. It's doing a great job, and it even has the minerals that put it back.
Nice.
It's the best. It's US. It's
I'm gonna
USA.
find out what it is from you.
Yeah, it's USA, and it's easy. It's a under the sink mount. And you just replace a subset of 5 filters once a year, but make sure you do that, or you're going to get a concentration of chemicals. But reverse osmosis is really good, but make sure you get it with the minerals added back. And oh my gosh, the water tastes so good. I had it to bring today, but example.
Well, if we can share, I think those are the 2 key takeaways that I would like to be able to share with the public. What are the contaminants? How can they test for them in a laboratory set? Like, I'm just thinking just 3 basic things. And then what are the mitigation if they find the contaminants?
Yeah, and if someone wants to test their own drinking water, be it well or be it your municipal water, the cheapest way to do it, they are using a EPA certified procedure, but I don't think it's gotten its official certification, but it's enough to where if you come back with high levels, then you could either just do something about it or pay for the, certified, but it's only like $80.
Okay, well, that's,
Which isn't bad. I mean, it's still cost prohibitive for some people,
Yeah.
for sure,
For PFAS testing.
but for PFAS.
Okay.
And in fact, I pulled the sample for that impaired stream and outside of the wastewater treatment plant in Carlisle, and my results should be in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So we can see what those are. But yeah, that's a good option for people.
yeah, can you share those
Yeah.
details with us?
And the lab that you
Yeah, the lab
found
that
to
you
do
used.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Great.
Like Cyclopure. And then, then if you wanted to get an official lab, Eurofins is a good one. But yeah, well, I have the PFAS toolkit on the Move Past Plastic website,
Okay.
and you can just request the toolkit and you'll get it instantly. As soon as you fill out the form, you get it instantly, and it has everything in there, and it bounces you to 4 other toolkits.
Will it have the RO recommendation?
It does. It has everything. I mean, anything. It has it for the municipality. It has it for the health. It has it for how can you minimize your exposure. It has it for all the different maps. I mean, it's extremely comprehensive. It's not pretty because it's just on a Google Doc. So I want to make it pretty someday and move it.
All right. Well, I think that would be just an initial kind of like, because this stuff, there's so many layers to it. But if I'm just thinking like an initial kind of, we want to have like an educational thing about
Yeah.
PFAS. Where can you test it?
Right.
What do you do if you find high levels? And just something that we can package.
Just short and sweet.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
are your highest levels,
Yeah.
at, and from your dental floss,
Mhm.
diapers.
Really? From dental
Oh,
floss?
yeah, dental floss,
Gosh.
diapers. It's everywhere, guys. And this is your toilet paper.
Oh. And another thing I was thinking Hannah, is if you could create, not to give you more work, but if you could create like a cheat sheet for how we can limit our exposure, like how you were just
Yeah.
telling Elizabeth
Yeah.
and I,
Yeah.
dusting, I have no
I wouldn't
idea.
have thought
And my
about
house
that.
is very dusty right
Mine
now.
is
So,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
those types of things.
Yeah, try not to buy polyester fuzzy blankets and plastic stuffed animals, which
Yeah.
everyone loves, right? But there are natural fiber alternatives instead of plastic, polyester sweatpants. You have cotton sweatpants, so you can
Mhm.
still be snuggly.
Yeah.
No,
One of the problems I've seen is it's getting harder and harder to find natural fibers. Like I cannot find like cotton stuff anymore.
It is.
Yeah.
But my closet is full of, I swear, 90% plastic clothing, polyester and spandex, nylon, whatever. But, I'm not throwing it away, like hence this, okay? These are brand new. So whatever I'm buying new going
Yeah,
forward,
get-
and I try to buy from secondary
Mhm.
hand stores. So most of your fibers that come off, whether it's natural or otherwise, is coming off, and more when the clothing is new and at its end of life. So when you go to a secondhand store to get your clothing, you're keeping it out of the landfill, even if it is polyester, right? And it's probably sloughed off a good deal of its fibers, so it's not as bad as getting it new. So, there's no perfect solution, like I said, but there are things that can be done. And I have a whole thing, presentation on just fashion, but then, you can cover, I can just do a presentation on hitting a few of these things, so, yeah.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
solutions.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
call it solutions to
Right.
minimizing your toxins. toxicities.
As
Yeah.
John said, Teflon, better living through chemistry.
Team, do you have anything else that you want to say or input or? Okay.
No.
Well,
Thank you for attending.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And we'll follow up and yeah, and we'll talk more. And Astrid, I got a couple more things for you to do, but we'll talk later, okay?
Okay.
Bye.
Take care. All right. Now I have a school meeting.